fantastic board president could not be here today, but she wants me to read this to you. She says, "Welcome everyone. I am sorry that I am not able to be here for our first ever cemetery walk. I wanted to be present so I could have the opportunity to thank everyone in the walk committee for all the effort, time, and ideas they put in to make this an interesting and enjoyable experience for everyone. I want to thank everyone, the presenters, for their willingness to step up and participate in the walk. I want to acknowledge one of our newest board members, Roberta Jepsen, who always did a lot of research for this project. I want to thank Cheryl, Miss Denny Nepple, for baking all the cookies, and thank for everyone coming, and please let us know how we did. Give us your suggestions and let us know if you would like to have a walk in the future. Okay, a little bit about the history of Morgan Cemetery. In 1872, a plot of 2 acres was designed in the Morgan Township, Section 25, as a public burial ground. In 1875, all of Section 25, including the 2 designated acres, was purchased by Hans and Catherine Ninson from the Iowa Railroad Land Company. In 1876, the Ninsons sold 4 acres to the Morgan Township Cemetery Association as a tribute to the Ninsons. It was called the Ninson Cemetery. However, in 1910, the name was changed to the Morgan Township Cemetery. Over the ensuing years, additional purchases have expanded the cemetery to its current 13.64 acres and over 4,000 graves. In 1942, the cemetery was placed under perpetual care, which means families were no longer responsible for their loved ones' grave care. The Cemetery Association has that responsibility. Our walk today will consist of 7 graves and hearing information about the deceased. Much time and research has gone into preparation of these presentations. Thank you to all of our volunteers who have so generously agreed to present today. And thank you also to our videographer, Ryan Ernst, and Jordan Safarian, and golf cart drivers, Chaz Peterson, Dick Fredericks. But please feel free to ask any questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. Homemade cookies and waters are provided by the brick shed. Our walk begins with Jochim Putzier and proceeds in a long circle, ending with Dora Hahn, an early benefactor of the library. If you need a ride, please walk towards the golf cart to proceed with transportation to some of the graves. Seating is provided in several of the sites. Please enjoy your presentation, and we thank everyone for joining us today.
Moin, as my German forebears would say, or as we Iowans currently say, hello. Moin, in the Low German language of my ancestors, was a greeting commonly used in the old country. So what are we going to hear here at this grave today? Our cemetery walk presentation at this grave is about the only Civil War veteran buried here at Morgan Cemetery. We will touch on who I am, why I left Germany, which actually has 2 parts. What was happening in Germany that made me leave, and what was happening in America that made me come. We settled in Scott County and eventually bought farmland in Crawford County. Also, we will touch on my participation in the American Civil War. And to wrap up, I will share some information about my family. So who am I? My name is Jochim Johann Wilhelm Putzier. My Americanized surname became Putzier. I was born May 25th, 1842 in Demmin, Germany. I am a naturalized American citizen who emigrated from Germany in the mid-19th century. I'm a farmer by occupation and a family man. I fathered 8 children. I will share I'm also a Civil War veteran from the 10th Iowa Infantry, Company D. My paternal grandfather was Johann, there's that Johann again, Michael Julius Putzier, born in 1771 in Germany. My paternal grandmother was Dorothea Elizabeth, born in 1774, also in Germany. My father, Johann Joachim, was born in 1805 in East Prussia, Germany. My mother, Marie Sophie Friederike Wegner, was born in 1810 in East Prussia, Germany. On October 14th, 1832, my father Johann and my mother Marie were married in Tutau, Demmin, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, Germany. Demmin is in the present-day northeast German section, close to the Baltic Sea coast. In the spring of 1858, my grandparents, my parents, and my 5 siblings came to America, arriving on board at the Elise, debarking at Ellis Island, New York, New York. We most likely boarded a train bound for the Midwest. We may even have traveled on the Chicago and Rock Island Railroad, which completed the first bridge across the Mississippi River connecting Rock Island, Illinois with Davenport, Iowa. Davenport being our final destination. Why Scott County, Iowa? A number of German immigrants of that time chose Scott County, Iowa as their new home. This was where the land was that was talked about in letters and advertisements in the old country. This was where good, rich soil could be had for raising wheat and rye and eventually corn and livestock. This was also the land of opportunity, to own the land. It also reminded us of home, the hills, the rivers, the forests, and of course, farming. Rivers on 3 sides bind Scott County. The Wapsipinicon is on the north, and the Mississippi is on the east and the south. There tends to be some disorientation by visitors because the majority of the Mississippi, which is a north to south river, actually runs east to west in most of Scott County. Some background on what was happening in Iowa and Scott County in the early 1800s. In 1833, settlement began. Towns started springing up along the Mississippi River. 1837, by March, Scott County had been completely surveyed. 1838, the county was organized, officers were elected, and a county seat, that being Davenport, was chosen. Davenport is one of the few cities that has maintained its original charter city designation, meaning it was a city before Iowa became a state. Iowa became the 29th state of the United States, December 28, 1846. And now the groundwork has been laid in Iowa for the German immigrants to arrive and start new lives. And these immigrants included the Putzier family. Why did we leave Germany? To understand some of those reasons for leaving, we need to turn back time and see what was happening in the old country. As I previously mentioned, my paternal grandparents were born in 1770s Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, Germany. This area of Germany was based in agriculture. While the land was good, many residents barely made a living and were poor and could not get ahead. By the mid-19th century, much of Germany, known as the German Confederation, a loose association of states, free cities, and other factions, persisted in a state of economic and social backwardness. Unlike other European states, France and Great Britain, the German Confederation did not experience large-scale agrarian reform or sharing of political and power from the nobility to members of the working class. Although the German state underwent slow industrialization, the German rank and file did not benefit from greater degrees of political or social freedom. Instead, semi-feudalistic systems of impoverishment and plutocratic power were maintained throughout the 19th century. Throughout the first half of the 19th century, Germany experienced population growth, leading to significant concerns of overpopulation, famine, pauperism, and underemployment. Many people simply struggled to make ends meet. Other reasons we left Germany for America: the 1840s potato famine, weather-related poor harvests, rising food prices, economic depression by the late 1840s. Early industrialization also led to widespread poverty and unemployment in other economic sectors. Collapse of cottage industries like flax spinning and linen weaving. America, we kept hearing, land of opportunity, free land, higher wages, chance to build a better life. So as I stated previously, my family lived in the Mecklenburg area of Prussia, that is, northeastern Germany. There the economy was tied to agriculture. This meant the land was owned by nobles, the king and the royal family, other aristocrats, and certainly not the farmer who actually farmed the land. We couldn't get ahead. Another reason for leaving the fatherland: the authoritarian government allowed the commoners few rights. Over time, this led to widespread discontent and social unrest. The rise of nationalism and the desire to establish democracy during the 1848 revolution failed. We got a problem. Some Germans had to leave town. Government control of everyday life was such that the government had to approve leaving the farm and moving to the city. Before you could leave, you had to have a job. Before you could get a house, you had to have a job. Also, you had to have a house before you could be married. All of these activities required government approval first. Government approval was also required before you could emigrate. No real freedom to move about. Also at this time, the landowners were beginning to be more efficient and didn't need as many farmers as in previous years. They would lay off the older farmer and deny him a pension and kick him out of the house. And he had no say in the matter. Religious persecution. In the old country, you worshiped how the state directed. In America, you could worship without government interference. Long military service requirement. In Germany, conscription of from 5 to 10 years, which had been in place since the 1650s, was changed to a compulsory 3 years by 1809. No military service requirement existed in America yet. Can you imagine my father, aged 52, packing up a lifetime in the old country, bringing his family, leaving behind friends and relatives forever, and traveling thousands of miles away to America? We didn't know the English language or American customs, but there was a great deal of information in the old country in the form of letters from previous immigrants and advertisements by companies recruiting immigrants bound for America. We chose Scott County, Iowa as our destination, as it was where many German immigrants had already gone. Germany did give up her German people. By the 1890s, an estimated 2.8 million German-born people were living in the United States. And now we turn to the Civil War. We actually have an authentic Civil War carbine, and this was used by the cavalry. My guy was actually an infantry guy. But I just wanted you to see this, and if you would like to lift it, I'm amazed at how heavy it is. Little did I know when I arrived in America in 1858 that my future in America would be directly tied to the Civil War of 1861 to 1865. How, you ask? Two reasons: land and conscription. The United States government rewarded military service with agricultural support and opportunities. In our country's early years, the U.S. had limited financial resources, but was rich in land. It was the natural way to support military service. Many longtime family farms across the Midwest traced their roots to bounty land grants from military service. The Homestead Act of 1862 was intricately connected to the Civil War. There were special provisions for veterans who could claim 160 acres of land for military service. The Homestead Act of 1862 required people to improve the land, build a house on it, and remain on the land in order to claim it. Veterans got credit for their time served, spent fighting for their country. Civil War veterans could deduct their time served from the residency requirement to as little as a 1-year minimum. Iowa was one of 30 states that participated in this program. My brothers, John, Carl, Fritz, and myself were subject to the Civil War draft as published in the Daily Gazette newspaper, City of Davenport, August 29, 1862, First Ward. The draft covered all able-bodied men, ages 18 to 35, unless exempted. Exemptions included finding a substitute or paying a significant fee, usually $300. We could not afford that, so we enlisted. My regiment, the 10th Iowa Infantry Regiment, was active from September the 6th, 1861 through August 15th, 1865. We were based out of Davenport. Our assignments were as follows. 2nd Brigade, 3rd Division. We were attached to the Army of the Mississippi until April of 1862. Then we were attached to the 17th Army Corps until December 1863. And finally, we were attached to the 15th Army Corps until April 1865. There was our gear consisted of haversacks and knapsacks, canteens, ammunition, caps, coats, shirts, wool pants. And keep in mind, Mississippi in the middle of summer isn't cool. Wool pants, shoes, and a musket rifle. There were approximately 10,000 military engagements during the Civil War. It is generally accepted that there were 50 major battles with about 100 other significant battles. The battles were fought in 3 theaters: the Eastern Theater, the Western Theater, and the Trans-Mississippi Theater. I fought in all 3, although the bulk of my time was in the Western Theater. The average Union soldier was 25.8 years old. I was 20 years old when I was mustered in 1862. The average soldier on both sides of the Civil War was a white, native-born Protestant farmer. My brothers and I were not native-born. We were paid $13 a month. Our fare consisted of hardtack, coffee, salt pork, cornmeal, and whatever fruits, vegetables, and berries that could be collected on the march. In our free time, a considerable amount of time was spent on military drilling, writing letters, playing games, drinking, smoking, whittling, making music, and of course, praying. Our regiment fought a number of Civil War battles. In the Mississippi, the Civil War's Western Theater, we were at Iuka, Corinth, Port Gibson, Raymond, Champion Hill, Big Black River Bridge, and the Siege of Vicksburg. In Tennessee, we were involved at Chattanooga, and Chattanooga was actually 3 separate battles on 3 successive days. The Battle of Orchard Knob, the Battle of Lookout Mountain, and the Battle of Missionary Ridge. We were involved in Sherman's infamous March to the Sea in Georgia. And finally, in North Carolina, Bentonville. This campaign fought March 19th through the 21st, 1865, was the last major battle of the war. It was the beginning of our much anticipated journey back to Iowa. And in summary, after my discharge from the 10th Iowa Regiment, I came back to Davenport, Iowa, and married Tricia Rose Vogel Putzier in 1868. My wife, Rose, was born in Germany February 16, 1849, and came to America with her parents that same year, settling in Davenport. According to the 1870 Scott County, Iowa census, I worked as a laborer in a soap-making factory. My family and I continued to live in Davenport for about 20 years and came to Crawford County in 1888, settling on a farm northwest of Schleswig. My brothers, Fritz and Christian, came to Crawford County around 1873 and began farming too. The railroad was the largest land agent in Crawford County at that time, and particularly in Schleswig and the surrounding area, even though technically Schleswig had not yet been incorporated. 2 of my other siblings, Carl and John C., remained in Scott County and are buried at Davenport. Carl died of the cholera in 1867, the 1866 to 1868 epidemic, and John C. was a businessman in Davenport. Our youngest sibling and only sister, Frederica Wilhelmina, also moved to Crawford County, marrying Julius G. Blumen. It is amazing how much life has changed. My birth, a world away in northeastern Germany, a boat ride to America, a train ride to Iowa, military service in an American Civil War, and owning land in Crawford County for my family and my livelihood. We left behind poverty, repression, and little hope for prosperity in the old country. We found a new life, a new country, a new language, which fueled our ambition. It took plenty of hard work. We reaped the fruits of our own hard work. Ownership of the land, ownership of the businesses we started, and a whole community in which to build and worship. I died on May 1st, 1911, Soldier Township, Crawford County, of chronic endocarditis. My wife, Tricia Rose, passed in August 1936. We were the parents of 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls, all born in America, and specifically in Iowa, my newly adopted homeland. And thank you for journeying with me. Our next presentation will be at the Claus Gottburg Cemetery grave over there. Thank you.
Okay, so I was wondering, what do a carpenter, funeral director, and Santa Claus Day have in common? Well, that's this guy right here, Claus Gottburg. These are a couple of his professions he had while in the community, and he was involved in during his time in Schleswig in the early 1900s. Just to give you a little bit of a background, I was born in Schleswig-Holstein, Germany in 1864 to my parents, John and Margaret Gottburg. I was one of 8 children. As I entered my teen years, I began learning how to be a wagon maker. With skilled hands and a work ethic, I later came to the United States in 1883 at the age of 19. Upon arrival, I worked in Iowa at several Ida County farms in the carpenter trade. I later went to Denver, Colorado, where I homesteaded and continued the carpenter trade there. Eventually, I made my way back to Omaha, where I continued my carpentry work. Since there was labor trouble going on at the time, I returned to Germany for several months and then returned to America, bringing along my nephews, Johannes and Henry Holtz. My life was shaped by craftsman work and service. It was in 1899 when I arrived in Schleswig. Shortly after it was incorporated, when I opened a furniture store in 1901, then later became the first funeral director of Schleswig. I worked for a few months in my trade upon my arrival in the new town. Then after a while, I built a new building here where I would run my furniture store, undertaking business for many years, helping with the commercial development of the community. It was said that my furniture store carried one of the largest selections of furniture in the county. We even featured made-to-order clothing where ladies could come in and have a dress or a skirt and select goods right in our store. In 1914, we even added a small cafeteria on the main floor so patrons could enjoy lunch and some good coffee. Around 1915, I sold my interest in the furniture store. I continued to be a carpenter and do contract work for a short time afterwards. But then I went on focusing the community as a funeral director. I also continued to work on cement work for family lots here at the cemetery. After my son John finished his course, he took over the funeral home and ran the business full-time in 1932. I believe in building things, but building community, and always found myself in active affairs of town. For example, I was on the town council, I was a member of the fire department, and the Odds Fellows Lodge. Also, I took pride in work being done on various projects going on. A project very dear to me was helping with the Friends Evangelical Church in 1903 under the leadership of Reverend Hansen and 9 other men. I was a charter member and served on the council there for many years. An event that brought me joy was helping to create the first ever Santa Claus Day right here in Schleswig, and it took place on Saturday, December 21st, 1910. It also brought much joy to the local children and neighbors alike. Santa arrived from Chicago in a train and met waiting children at the depot. Santa Claus headquarters were at my store, C. Gottburg and Company, and some recall Santa being lowered into the lower level from a freight elevator from the second floor down to the first floor to greet the children. My family was very important to me. I married Katarina Clausen in 1902, and we enjoyed many years together in Schleswig and were blessed with 5 children. In 1932, I also decided to move back to Omaha to be closer to my daughters, Elsie, Mabel, and Freda, who were residing there. Our sons remained here in Schleswig. John continued the undertaking business, and son Arthur conducts the city meat market. I enjoy excellent health throughout my life and enjoyed many years with my family and friends. I departed from life at the age of 80 following complications from hardened arteries, and I passed away on June 2nd, 1945 at the Carroll Hospital and was buried here at Morgan Cemetery. So thanks for joining me today, and our next stop will be with Fred Jepsen. Thanks, guys.
Good afternoon. My name is Jurgen Frederick Jepsen. Eventually, with the addition of my family, I became Fred Jepsen Sr. I was born October 6, 1854, in Jubel, Schleswig-Flensburg, Schleswig-Holstein, Germany. It is not far from Denmark in northern Germany. In the years prior to our family leaving Germany, there had been much conflict between the Schleswig-Holsteiners and the Danes. In the old country, we lived close to the various conflicts at that time. Around age 13 of 1868, my father decided it was safer to leave, and we immigrated to America. Reasons for leaving Germany included a lot of what you heard from the Civil War veteran. Collapse of cottage industries like flax spinning and linen weaving, failure of the 1848 revolution to establish democracy. Some of us had to leave town. Compulsory military service. A number of sons sneaked out of town. And of course, the Schleswig Holstein conflict with the Danes. Brief discussion of these reasons will enlighten you about packing up whole lifetimes, leaving village friends and families, dropping occupations and craftsman businesses, and leaving all of it behind. Consider, many Germans did not go very far from home, ever, but now to a new land, thousands of miles away. Wow. Huge decision. By the way, by the mid-1840s to 1850s, Germany had had a lot going on, and not all of it was good for the common people. Economic and political issues, compulsory military conscription, and religious differences between Reformed, Lutheran, Protestants, and Catholics. The religion to follow in any particular area of the country was dictated by the government. There had been a war with Napoleon Bonaparte, a potato famine, crop failures, slow rise of industrialization, and a movement away from the hard work on the farm. The rise of industrialization led to greater populations in the larger towns and cities, straining housing and necessary services. There was also talk of reforms, a push for political and economic freedom or nationalism, which was sweeping Europe, including Germany. Are you hearing me okay? Okay. Keep in mind, if you wanted to leave the farm and move to town, you needed government permission. If you went to the city, it was required you had a job. Government permission was also needed to get a house or place to live. You couldn't do anything without government permission. Even to immigrate and leave the country, permits were required. Slowly increasing industrialization drove the need for labor in town and reduced labor in the country. New ways of farming, including farm implements, pushed this old farm tenants off the land and out of a house in which he and his family had been living for the past 10 or 20 years. When that happened, these farmers also lost pensions, and they had no say in the matter. Remember, the farmers' tenants didn't own the land, the house, the farm equipment, or the crops. This was owned by nobility. The compulsory 3-year military commitment was a real sore spot for many families. So much so, sometimes a young man would cut off a finger or a toe to avoid the draft. Keep in mind, the nobility led the army, the middle class or small businessmen and craftsmen supplied the army, and the lower classes or peasants composed the army. Life in America. Like a number of early German settlers and farmers, we came to Clinton County in Iowa. A number of other German settlers had also settled in adjoining Scott County. My family and I arrived in 1868 when I was age 13. There was much to learn. In eastern Iowa, most of the land was already spoken for. In Scott and Clinton counties, as was already told, we heard western Iowa was up and coming, especially because of the railroad. The coming of the railroad caused Crawford County to explode. In growth, industry, farmland, availability, small beginning businesses, and of course, new settlers, including my father, mother, and siblings. All of us came together to Crawford County, Goodrich Township, to begin our new American life. On July 1st, 1877, at the age of 23, I married Anna Marguerite Marquette. We started our life together in Goodrich Township, Section 6, and built a farming operation and raised our family there. I bought the farm for $5 an acre. The newly emerging community had narrow dirt trails for roads. Now, graveled and paved roads have completely transformed the county. Livestock, other farm produce such as milk, fruit, or vegetables can now be quickly transported by truck. Besides transportation, the time-saving modernization of all farm implements has created a very efficient farmer who feeds the world. I remember walking from early morn until dusk behind a 2-horse plow, covering about 1.5 acres a day. Farming and livestock chores were all done by hand. Gardening, laundry, even our clothes were all made by hand. Not long after we began farming, we also were hit by the black blizzard of 1888. It has also been known as the children's blizzard because so many children died that day as they were going to come home from country school. It affected a number of Midwestern states, including Iowa and Nebraska. January 12th, 1888 started out as an unusually warm winter day with temperatures increasing 20 to 40 degrees above normal. The sun was out and the snow was melting. A beautiful day. Children went to school. Farmers went to town to get supplies. The trains were running. Keep in mind, school was not held every day because the walk to school should just be too cold. But not on this day. People were out and about, and school was in season. Shortly after school was finished for the day, the weather changed, and changed almost immediately into a blizzard. The blizzard winds caused blowing snow and ice, such that one could literally not see. Some stories told about that day said people could not see 3 steps in front of them. The temperatures plummeted to minus 42 degrees here and minus 47 degrees at nearby Washita, Iowa. That temperature didn't include the wind chill, which we always have to have now. Some children were stranded in one-room schoolhouses with single teachers and little food or firewood. Remember, since the day started so warm that day, not all wood boxes had been replenished. My brother, Jurgen Schroeder, and his family had been helping our brother butcher meat that day, which was normally done in the winter. Unfortunately, they were caught in the blizzard as they were heading home. They lived in the same section as Jurgen's brother and were not far from home. Jurgen was cutting across a cornfield instead of using the road, which would have made the trip longer. The horse's boot and the double tree broke. Jurgen overturned the wagon for his family to crawl underneath to shelter out of the raging blizzard. Jurgen left and went to look for his horses. In the meantime, his wife must have become worried and left the wagon's shelter. She only made it about 40 yards from the wagon and was found deceased the next day. Jurgen and all of his children survived. However, one of the children, Teddy, suffered frozen fingers and a permanently crippled left hand, but he went on to become a very skilled carpenter. The northwest wind drifted the snow such that it filled up even with the fences, and you couldn't find the gates to open them. No one really knows, but the death toll from the storm was estimated between 400 to 1,000 throughout the country. As you will recall, I mentioned the Jepsen family acquired land in Goodrich Township in Crawford County, some of which was owned by Abraham Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln received 160 acres of land in Iowa for his service in the Black Hawk Indian War of 1832. 40 acres was situated in Tama County, and the remaining 120 acres right here in Goodrich Township, Crawford County. This land was sold to Henry Edwards on March 22, 1892, by Lincoln's surviving son, Robert, for $1,300. Henry Edwards was a great-great-nephew of Mr. Lincoln. Eventually, the land was acquired by the Jepsen family. You may have heard of Yellow Smoke Park in Denison, Iowa. It was named after an Omaha Indian. There really was an Indian by the name of Yellow Smoke. Actually, there were 3 of them. Number 1 grandfather, Chief Yellow Smoke. Who was sadly murdered in Dunlap, Iowa in November 1868. Number 2, the father, Chief Yellow Smoke, and number 3, son, Chief Yellow Smoke. The passing down of the name signified the family lineage. Chief Yellow Smoke also was the keeper of the sacred pole called Umohoti, a significant symbol of the Omaha tribe. Every spring and fall, Yellow Smoke, the father, would camp nearby. He became a good friend and often came to our house and visited for several hours. We had a livestock scale on the farm, and Yellow Smoke wondered what that was. He asked to be weighed, and so we did. He tipped the scales at 265 pounds. In those days, that was quite heavy. During our years in Crawford County, I was very much involved in the continuing growth of Schleswig. Not only did I farm, but I was involved in a number of community activities. By 1885, I had received my naturalization papers. I became eligible to vote. Some of my community activities included German American Library League. I was president. Farmers Cooperative Exchange Cream Station, president and director. Farmers Lumber and Grain Company, president. Farmers State Bank, original incorporator, stockholder, and director until 1928. One thing about that, my family still had some of the shares in that bank. German American Red Cross Fund, a number of fundraising campaigns. German Farmers Insurance Company, policyholder and treasurer, 1907 to 1928. Note, the insurance business was conducted in German until 1937, the year I was born. You may have heard the story how I started the Farmers Lumber and Coal Company, which eventually became Farmers Elevator Company. This anecdote retelling is taken from the publication of Schleswig, Iowa, the first 75 years, pages 34 and 35. One day in 1905, an automobile driven by Fred Jepsen, I don't know if that's spelled right or not, or if I say it right, manager of the Green Bay Lumber Company, caused my horse-drawn wagon to bolt off the road and forced us into the ditch. Mr. Gissax, a proud and prominent figure in town, was also involved in many community activities in early Schleswig. He helped set up the phone company and is involved in other social and cultural activities. He was one of the first people in town to have a motor car. Unfortunately, he was not very good at controlling it. He made light of the accident. However, this did not sit well with me. The more I thought about it, the more upset I got. So I got some friends and neighbors together to do something about it. We organized a new company and started another lumber yard, the Farmers Lumber and Coal Company. Mr. Gidek's Green Bay Lumber Yard now had additional competition. Our new lumber yard was built next to the railroad to allow coal to be unloaded directly into the bins and the lumber nearby. I remember those bins being there, the coal bins. To get a quick start, we also bought out the inventory of the Noble and Dessel lumber yard. Talk about German ingenuity. You may know it today as Farmers Cooperative Elevator Company, or FAC, in Schleswig. You will note There is no longer a Green Bay Lumber Company in Schleswig. The legacy is ability to work hard, the ambition to get ahead, and the determination to carry out these desires are three qualities we German immigrants brought with us from this old country. It allowed us to prosper in Iowa, and especially in Schleswig, Iowa. My wife, Marguerite, and I raised a family of 8 children on our farm. We also buried 3 children, additional ones, 2 daughters and a son. In April 1922, we retired and moved into Schleswig. My son, Teddy, built our home, and 3 generations have lived there. It would be my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father, and me. On Sunday, March 18th, 1928, I was taken suddenly ill and eventually ended up in a Battle Creek hospital for an appendicitis operation. However, it burst, and antibiotics were not yet in existence. Penicillin was discovered that year in September. The first use on human was not until 1941. I died March 23, 1928, leaving a shocked community. My wife, Anna Marguerite, passed 8 years later on August 30th, 1936. Thank you for joining me today. I now let you proceed to the Henry Naeve grave by Marvel.
Hello, my name is Henry Naeve. I was born at Davenport in Scott County, Iowa on March 27, 1856. I was one of 11 children born to Nicholas and Elizabeth Hornick Naeve. When I was a boy, I moved with my parents to Clinton County, where our family farmed until 1879. It was then that my brother William and I left our family home and moved to Crawford County, making our new home 1/2 mile east of Schleswig. I made my home with my brother for several years and finally farmed the place for myself. I was blessed to be a successful farmer and was well respected among the members of our community and surrounding areas. In 1882, I married Emma Tegens. We continued to farm until 1918, when we moved into Schleswig to spend our retirement years. The house we built for our retirement years has been in residence for 3 generations of my family since. Today, it is still in fine condition and is the home of my 4th generation great-great-grandson, Craig Toit, and his wife, Val. Emma and I had 10 children. I was known for being a kind and indulgent husband and father, making every sacrifice for my family. Our son Henry died in infancy, and our son Robert passed away 3 years before me. Son Nick was the only one who continued to call Schleswig home into his adult years. But the other 4 sons moved away. 2 of our daughters married young men from the Schleswig-Ricketts area, namely Edna, Mrs. Otto Toit, and Meta, Mrs. Herman Bielenberg. Daughter Ruth, Mrs. Edgar McDonnell, took residency in the Henry Naeve home. I was active in civic affairs of the community and took an interest in local affairs. I was a member of the Independent Order of Oddfellows and also belonged to the Woodmen. In 1906, I sold land from my farm, which was located on the east edge of Schleswig, to the Modern Woodmen of America, one of the 3 early fraternities in Schleswig. It was used for the formation of the original part of Schleswig Park today. By the 1920s, the park was a practice grounds for the Woodmen's drill teams for parades. It became a popular picnic site. It became known as Woodmen's Park, then Naeve Park, and finally City Park. Also included were 2 additional blocks to be used for additional housing locations. In 1943, my children transferred the lots on the park's east edge to the city, expanding once again the eastern border of the city of Schleswig. Today, the plat maps of Schleswig show the Naeve first and second additions to the town of Schleswig. We built our retirement home in the Naeve addition. I enjoyed relatively good health throughout my lifetime until the final 14 days when I suffered several heart attacks. I welcomed relief from my suffering on May 6, 1927, when I passed away at my home in Schleswig at the age of 71. My funeral service was held in my home, with the Methodist minister from Arthur officiating. Interment followed at the Morgan Cemetery, where Pictoria Lodge 606 was in charge at my gravesite services. Pallbearers were 6 Oddfellow Lodge members. Today, I also have 2 great-grandchildren still living in the town of Schleswig, namely Joyce Toit Miller and her brother Lowell Toit. Thank you so much for coming today. Your next stop is Hap Peters.
Well, I'm Hap, but they don't say why I'm Hap, why the nickname's Hap. Maybe he was happy all the time. I don't know. So, I think it has something to do with his spelling of his name. If you've ever enjoyed a black cow, a green river, or a cherry phosphate in Schleswig during the 1950s and 60s, you may have been in my place of business. Hi, I'm Herbert Peters. Everyone calls me Hap. I only owned and operated the Peters Rexall drugstore, which was located next to the City Hall building of today. To begin the story of my life, I will say I was born on March 12, 1897 in Crawford County to Claus J. and Emma Schroeder Peters. I was one of 12 children. I married Mabel May Clark, and together we were blessed with the birth of 2 daughters, Nora Lee, Mrs. Donald Kroger, who lived until 1984, and Lois May, who preceded me in death. I served in the military and was a World War I veteran, receiving military honors by our local post of the American Legion and Veterans of Foreign Wars. Soon after my discharge, I would venture into the retail business in which I would be associated for the following 46 years. The drugstore building itself also has a beginning. The building was originally purchased by Charles Worth in 1899. It is believed that Sidney McRoy and Henry Boyson were the first druggists there. For 3 years, I worked with Mr. Boyson. My brother Emil and I followed Henry Boyson in the drugstore business in 1921. In 1937, Emil moved to Denison, and I continued alone for many more years to come. Herbert Faust assisted as pharmacist. Our drugstore carried the Rexall brand name for prescriptions and the other line of products. Mabel and I worked together in our store, making it a clean and friendly place for folks to come to relax in our 2 booths in the back of the store to socialize over a soda, fountain drink, or an ice cream treat, or to purchase any needed goods. Our store was popular with all ages. The youngsters had a dilemma trying to decide how to spend their 5 cents. Should they spend it on bubblegum, penny candy, a slow poke sucker, or splurge it all 5 cents, on a favorite big candy bar? The teenagers found our store to be a youth center of their day, where they could gather before and after school or on Wednesday or Saturday nights. The old-fashioned soda fountain, originally from the 1900s, with the twirling red bar stools, was filled with teens according to their ordering their special ice cream treats, chocolate marshmallow sundaes with roasted peanuts, banana splits, root beer floats, and tall sodas, or beverages of cherry cokes, green rivers, and lime phosphates. Everyone could charge in our store, with payment to be received within a week or a month. Many times I wrote a charge ticket for 1 cherry coke, 5 cents. I carried seal test ice cream. Many pints and quarts of hand-packed ice cream in round cardboard cartons were filled and sold to customers to be taken home. Adults also were regulars in our store. Besides the pharmacist and the over-the-counter meds in the back of the store, our store was like an old general store. We carried everything from toothpaste to vet supplies. We sold tobacco products, paint and wallpaper, small appliances, country school books, comic books, Sunday newspaper, gifts, cosmetics, jeez. You'll be glad to know I didn't get educated here, so. Cosmetics, gift wrap, batteries, cameras, ice cream bars, and sliced ice cream squares for wedding receptions. We always enjoyed the young people who came into our store. On Halloween, I gave 5 cents to youngsters, and for years I invited the seniors to come for a treat on their choice on graduation night. We worked long hours at the drugstore, usually opening before 8 a.m. and closing at 9 to 10 at night. Stores in town were always open on Wednesday and Saturday nights. I worked hard within my community as well because community was important to me. I was a member of the Schleswig Community Club, volunteer fire department, school board, and American Legion Post 645. At one time, I served as the head of all 4 organizations at the same time. I also was a member of the Schleswig Businessmen's Club. I tried to be generous in my donations to the VFW raffles and other town functions. In January of 1947, fire gutted the building. While our store was being remodeled and restocked, City Hall next door served as the drugstore. I continued in business until 1966 when an unknown illness suddenly developed. I had lung surgery. Came home and unexpectedly passed away on June 10th, 1966 at the age of 69. My wife Mabel and my daughter Nora Lee continued the business for a few years. The business closed in 1969. Over the years, many happy memories were made at our store, and to this day, our building is still referred to as the drugstore. Additional information. Other businesses occupying the drugstore include the following. Bartles Bakery, owned by Lawrence and LaRue Bartles, was a popular place to go for coffee breaks and noon meal. Besides their bakery goods, they also carried greeting cards and other items. Following them was Uncle Lee's Pizza, opened their store specializing in varieties of pizzas. The next business was Piccadilly's Pizza, also serving pizzas and other foods. These stores were popular among all the young people and were very busy with families following school functions.
Okay, guten Tag. It's so good to haben Sie hier. Mein Name ist Jurgen Schroeder. Werd geboren in 1859 in the state of Puttgarden in the island of Firmen in the Ostsee near Schleswig-Holstein, Deutschland. In 1868 ik to Devonport, Iowa komst. And there was a whole new culture and a whole new language to learn. I had my family, my German Linzmen were there, and they helped me find my way. I got a job on a farm, and I was there for 2 years. But at the end of the second year, I wanted to get out on my own. So I was able to rent a farm near Tama, Iowa. And there I married Wilhelmina Karstens, and we started a family. We had 4 children. Now, in my obituary, it says that Wilhelmina died in 1873. But if that were the case, all 4 of our children would have been born after she had died. Now, my Wilhelmina was quite a woman, but that's a little bit too much. We were actually married in 1873. In 1877, my brother Nicholas, he said he found some really good farmland. It was out here by Denison, Iowa, and he wanted me to come and help set up the farm for him. And I went out and we worked together for 6 years. And at the end of the 6 years, he got married and he wanted to take over the whole farm. So he bought out my interest. And with the money that I got, I was able to buy a farm, 80 acres here in Morgan Township. The country was filling up here at that time, and the farms were being developed, but you still had to go all the way to Denison for supplies, and there were hardly any existing roads. With the work horses and a farm wagon, it took most of the day just to get there. Then if you want to do any business, or if you wanted to visit at all, you almost had to stay over and come back the next day. So a trip to Denison and back took 2 days. Now, they say, there's some people anyway, that say way in the future sometime that's going to get to the place where you can go to Denison and come back home in the same hour. Don't you believe that? No, no, no. I was elected to be the road commissioner for the Morgan Township here, and we made some progress. But at the same time, we were trying to put in a school system, and we wanted to build a schoolhouse every 2 miles. And that took time. There was more and more people that were coming to this part of the country, and there got to be 3 and 4 families on every section of land. And there were lots of kids. The Book family, they started the little town of Morgan over here, and but they, as the country filled up, they weren't able to keep up with the demand for supplies. So I got to thinking that maybe another store might work. So I set one up on my farm, and I got Neil's cook to be the blacksmith there, and we put in a tavern. In spite of all the dry laws they had in those days, they were crazy. And they had a big dance hall, and excuse me. But with all of that work and all of that effort and that we put into that, trying to get things started there, it was just too much for my Wilhelmina, and she died. But I was able to find a young lady, Johanna Lorenzen, to come in and help with the house and the kids while I worked on the farm and the businesses, and that worked out pretty well for a while. But then after a year, though, I ended up marrying her, and we had 4 more children. The stores, they was doing pretty well, and the businesses was pretty good. We were buying cream and eggs and all this sort of thing, and we had a little stream down through the valley, and it had cool water, kept the cream fresh. And we had up on the hill, we had a dry well that we put the beer in for the tavern. And when we needed some in a hurry, sometimes we'd take a small boy and run him down the well, and then he would tie the ropes around the kegs, and we'd hoist them both out of there. Chris Gerstorff was one of the ones that he remembers well his time on the end of the rope going down. Then my oldest boy, Willie, was getting to be pretty good size already too. So we put him on a wagon full of supplies, and he went around from farm to farm and sold the supplies directly to the people right on their farm. Then I wanted to get a post office if I could, but they required a special name. And my friend, Dr. Pfister, he suggested Hohenzollern, because that was a royal family name of the royal family in Prussia. And they even have a castle in Prussia. That's the Hohenzollern Castle. So that was a big name over there. The most exciting thing that happened in this part of the country, though, was the thing that was talked about a lot were the railroads. They were talking about railroads were all over the place. And finally they were saying they were coming right through this part of the country here. And boy, that would really make the business boom. But when that railroad did come, it didn't come to my town. And it didn't come to the town of Morgan either. It stopped in between and started a new town. That was kind of the idea. I think they were going to sell all the lots themselves and make lots of money on starting the new town. But to survive in business, you had to be on the railroad. So the Book family, they were going to move, and they decided they were going to build all new buildings in the new town and forget about theirs. Of course, their buildings were getting kind of old anyway. But my buildings in my town, they're a lot better shape. They are almost new. So I heard about the Hollenbeck brothers from Omaha, and I got a hold of them, and we moved all of my buildings into the new town. I got kind of a bulk rate on that. I had bought a number of lots on 2nd Street, up around Birch Street, and the railroad, when they were laying out the plan, they wanted Cedar Street to be the main commercial street up and down there. It would go back past their depot. But when the Book family put their buildings a block south of Cedar Street, and our group was a block north of Cedar Street, then 2nd Street became the main street in town. That railroad, they didn't get their way all the time. But then tragedy struck once more. My wife, Johanna, she died in 1899 in childbirth, right in the middle of all the activity of starting the new town. And we had a huge funeral for her. And they said that the procession out here to the Nissen Cemetery for the burial, they said there was 160 teams and wagons in there, and there was a line almost from here all the way to town. I did marry a second time, or third time I should say, to Mrs. Tina Fromm, and we did have one more child. And I was on the first city council in Schleswig, and I was the postmaster for the first 4 years. And I was a member of the Sons of Hermann Social Verein, the social fraternity, and I was also on the Deutsche Bruderfeste, which is a German organization. And I had the dance hall that I had out in the Hohenzollern. We moved into town, but it was fairly active for a little while, but we had a problem. Where they had the last gunfight in Schleswig was in the dance hall, and that shut it down. That's probably a whole another story for another time. We won't go into that today. But I was a strong supporter of the volunteer fire department and of all the activities that was in a great big new opera house that they put in town. And the town was really growing rapidly in those days, and it was really active. And you could even hear English being spoken right on the streets now and then. I was beginning to feel my age and considered retiring about 1911 or 1912. After all, I was 61 years old. And there were some young guys that kind of were interested in the businesses, so I sold them most of my businesses there. But then just 1 year later, on Christmas Eve in 1913, the new owners, they decided they were going to stack up the furnace for the long holiday weekend. But they overdid it, and they caught the buildings on fire, and all 3 buildings burned right down to the ground. And that was kind of sad to see my buildings go. And it was quite a blow for the town. But I had my money out of there. It wasn't even mean guilt. I had a pleasant retirement after that, and I passed away peacefully on July the 25th, 1922. But I had a lot of family around here, and maybe some of you remember some of them. My son Eddie, he lived in town until he was nearly 90 years old. When he was younger, he liked to play a little pool and some cards, and they had a nickname for him. They called him Schlick. Schlick Lady Schrader, they said. And then there was my grandson, Charlie Evers. My daughter Frida had married Willie Evers, and they moved up by Gelva when they had Charlie. But when he was able, he kept coming back down here. He got together with Johannes Gosch's daughter Imogene, and they got married. And before you knew it, Charlie and Johannes were in business together. And Charlie had some good business ideas, because he come from good stock. He was my grandson. But the Johannes, he was kind of stuck in his ways once in a while, but they got along, kind of. Actually, that's just probably enough for today. That's been fatty. There is now some more people that would like to talk to you over here, and you should listen to them.
I'm doing Dora Hahn. Did you know that one person alone could benefit a town library just by donating $7,000? That would be still a wonderful library today, almost 60 years later. That's me, Dora Ernst Hahn. I was the daughter of Peter Ernst and Louise Kortum. I was born April 15th, 1884. I was baptized and confirmed to the Lutheran faith. I was a member of the United Church of Christ and a member of the Women's Guild. In 1909, I married Eddie Hahn. Eddie and I lived in the farm for many years. I had one daughter, Elvira. Unfortunately, Elvira passed away in 1931 at the age of 19. In 1943, Eddie and I moved to town until he passed away from illness just 6 years later. I really enjoyed reading books and visiting the library. However, when I went to the library, it was just books stacked on top of books in a small location with voting machines, city jails, fire stations, and also a public restroom shared with the city hall. The books were often closed and locked away in cabinets on the wall. Our library, which was started by a group of ladies 40 years ago, these ladies were members of the study club. Luckily, the telephone company sold the building to the town. Therefore, this is the location of our new library. That's when I would help the remodeling project by donating $7,000, and with the help of Dr. Broers, this project was underway. Due to the age of the building and the damage caused by the removal, the building went to the post office. The project was rather difficult. We definitely had a major challenge on our hands because there was no west wall at first to the library. We had to build up the library from the bottom, from the ground up, just by removing all the books to the basement while the building was underway. Mrs. Sin was the head of our library project, helping us move the books up the rickety steps from the basement and placing them on their proper shelves up above. I sadly passed away at the age of 80 in 1964, before the library opened its door in 1966. The library is an amazing location to have all of these wonderful books. I thank everybody for joining us today. We are finished for this presentation. We have Miss Marvel's wonderful cookies at our shed, along with water. We thank you guys so much for coming out today. Please come out again, and please tell us what we can do different next time. Thank you.